In today's podcast, I want to talk about signs of autism that therapists often mistake for personality flaws. Have you ever tried to explain your marriage to a counselor and somehow walked out feeling even more alone? You went in hoping someone would finally understand. You tried to describe the loneliness, the emotional distance, the way your ASD husband seems blank when you're breaking down, the way he clings to routines, the way he corrects tiny details but misses the emotional point, the way he can sound rude, cold, dismissive, robotic, especially when you are desperate for tenderness. And instead of feeling seen, maybe you heard something like this. Oh, have you tried using more I statements? Maybe he just needs to learn your love language. Or maybe you're expecting too much emotional responsiveness. Or maybe you both just need better communication skills. And you sat there thinking, no, that's not it. Because what you're describing is not ordinary marital conflict. It's not just poor communication. It's not simply a husband who forgets flowers, avoids chores, or struggles to talk about feelings. For many neurotypical wives experiencing Cassandra syndrome, the pain comes from living beside a partner whose behaviors are repeatedly misread by family, friends, church leaders, and even counselors as personality flaws. For example, he's cold, selfish, stubborn, rude, controlling. He lacks empathy. He's purposely being emotionally neglectful. And here's where it gets complicated. Those behaviors may truly hurt you as the NT wife. They may have left you feeling invisible, abandoned, anxious, depressed, and emotionally starved, but they may not mean what you were told they mean. So today, I want to talk about the sub-microscopic signs of autism that therapists often mistake for character flaws. These are not the obvious signs people usually associate with autism. They are tiny, easily missed neurological differences that show up inside a neurodiverse marriage. And when no one recognizes them, the wife often gets blamed for being too sensitive, too needy, too emotional, too demanding, or impossible to please. That is the Cassandra wound. You see something, you feel something, you know something is deeply off, but when you try to name it, people don't really believe you. Now, let's start with one of the most painful signs, flat affect, okay? You, as the NT wife, you're crying, you may even be shaking. You're trying to explain that you feel alone in the marriage, and your ASD husband looks at you with a blank face. No visible sadness, no sense of urgency, no softness in the eyes, no reaching for you, no obvious emotional response. So naturally, your nervous system concludes, well, he doesn't care. And a counselor may chime in and conclude, well, I see that your husband lacks empathy. But for most undiagnosed autistic men, flat affect does not mean emotional emptiness. It may mean the emotion is not showing up on the outside. He feels confused, concerned, anxious, overwhelmed, even ashamed. But his face, voice, and body don't transmit those feelings in a way you can read. And this is devastating for the neurotypical wife because your emotional system is waiting for a signal of safety. You're waiting for his face to say, I see you, you matter, I'm with you. But instead, you get blankness. And blankness feels like abandonment. And this is why Cassandra syndrome is not just frustration. It's a nervous system injury. You keep reaching for emotional confirmation, and your body keeps receiving no signal back. Now, let's talk about rigidity. Many neurotypical wives say, well, he always has to have things his way, or he refuses to be flexible, or if plans change, everything falls apart, or he controls the schedule, the route, the temperature, the noise level, the finances, the timing, the way things are done. Now, in standard counseling, this may be labeled as stubbornness or simply being a control freak. Now, sometimes control can absolutely be harmful, but in autism, rigid routines often function as neurological stabilizers. Predictability reduces anxiety. Routine reduces cognitive load. Sameness helps the nervous system stay regulated. So when you ask him to suddenly change plans, to go somewhere that's going to be noisy, to handle a spontaneous request, or to emotionally pivot in the middle of a conflict, he's not going to experience that as a simple preference. He's going to experience that as internal chaos. Now, that doesn't mean you should have to live in a marriage where only his nervous system matters. You matter too. Your needs matter too. Your flexibility, your loneliness, your sacrifices, and your exhaustion matter too. But the interpretation changes. Instead of, he just doesn't care about what I need, you can move it to, his nervous system panics when too much unpredictability enters the room. That distinction matters because it changes the solution. You're not trying to defeat stubbornness. You're trying to build predictable pathways towards flexibility. Now, another submicroscopic sign is delayed processing. You, as the neurotypical wife, ask a question. He freezes. You ask again. He gets irritated. You try to explain your feelings. He says nothing. And then later, maybe hours later or even days later, he finally responds, sometimes with a strangely logical answer that feels completely disconnected from the pain you were expressing. To the wife, this feels like avoidance. It feels like stonewalling. It feels like emotional neglect, doesn't it? And sometimes, yes, avoidance patterns can develop over time. But in undiagnosed autism, delayed processing is very real. The brain may be trying to process words, tone, emotional intensity, facial expressions, implied meaning, past conflict, fear of saying the wrong thing, and sensory overwhelm all at the same time. That's a lot. Meanwhile, you're standing there thinking, why can't he just answer me? And he's probably thinking, I don't know what the right answer is, and if I say it wrong, this will just get worse. So he goes quiet. Then you feel abandoned. Then he feels attacked. Then you pursue. Then he withdraws. Then you raise your voice. Then he shuts down. And then the counselor chimes in and says, you both need to communicate better. But this is not a communication issue. This is neurology, trauma, attachment, sensory load, and processing speed colliding inside one conversation. Now, let's look at what many wives describe as rudeness. Maybe he interrupts, corrects small details, uses a harsh tone without realizing it, answers too bluntly, doesn't soften his words. Maybe he doesn't know when you're embarrassed or doesn't pick up on the room. Maybe he misses the emotional implication of what you just said. And then you think, how can he not know that was hurtful? And then the counselor chimes in and says, well, he needs to be less self-centered. There might be some narcissism going on here. But many autistic people struggle with real-time social inference. That means the hidden layers of conversation may not register automatically. For example, tone, timing, facial expression, emotional context, what should be said, what should not be said, what the other person probably needs right now. A neurotypical wife may process all of that instantly. But for the ASD spouse, it requires conscious effort. And even then, he's going to miss it. Again, this doesn't erase the hurt. A blunt comment still lands in your body. A harsh tone still creates pain. Being corrected constantly still feels humiliating. But when you understand the mechanism, you can stop asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, why is he so rude? The better question is, what social emotional cue is he missing? And can he learn to recognize it with direct language? Now here's another issue. Problem solving instead of comforting. You say, I feel so overwhelmed. And he says, well, then make a list. You say, I'm scared. And he says, well, statistically, that probably won't happen. Or you say, I feel so unloved. And he says, I paid the bills, didn't I? And something inside you collapses. Because you didn't need data. You didn't need a spreadsheet or a repair manual. You needed warmth. You needed emotional presence. You needed him to say, oh, that sounds hard, honey. I'm sorry. I'm here for you. I can see why you feel that way. Or I didn't want you to feel alone with this. But most autistic husbands show care by trying to reduce the problem. To them, fixing the issue is love. To you, staying emotionally present is love. And without translation, his attempt to help feels like abandonment to you. This is one of the cruelest parts of Cassandra syndrome. You may actually be married to someone who believes he's helping, while you're experiencing his help as proof that he doesn't understand you at all. Now let's talk about the lack of spontaneous reciprocity. He doesn't ask how your day was. He doesn't notice your new haircut. He doesn't follow up about the medical appointment you were worried about. He doesn't seem curious about your inner world. Instead, he may talk at length about his interests, but not ask about yours. And over time, you start to feel like furniture in the house. Useful, present, expected, but not deeply known. Now, in a traditional counseling model, this may be interpreted as selfishness. And honestly, many wives have lived with someone that feels exactly like selfishness. But in autism, spontaneous social reciprocity is not automatic. Your ASD spouse does not intuitively know that asking follow-up questions creates emotional connection. He doesn't realize that remembering a detail communicates love. He doesn't understand that curiosity is not optional in a marriage. To him, if nothing is obviously wrong, everything is fine. To you, he's not emotionally reaching for you and everything feels deeply wrong. That mismatch can become heartbreaking. Now here's another issue. Sensory overload disguised as irritability. Maybe he becomes tense in restaurants, snaps at family gatherings, withdraws during vacations, gets short-tempered in crowded stores, refuses certain events, needs silence after work. Maybe he seems angry when the house is noisy, and you experience this as rejection. Well, he hates being with family, or he ruins every vacation trip, or he can't handle normal life, or he makes everything about him. But if autism is involved, I can promise you that sensory overload is a major hidden factor. Noise, lights, multiple conversations, touch, transitions, smells, crowds, social masking, decision fatigue, all of it builds until his nervous system reaches capacity. Then what you see is irritability. But what's going on underneath is overload. This matters because if no one identifies the sensory issue, everyone keeps treating the irritability as a personality problem. And you keep feeling personally rejected by something that's not personal. Now, again, I want to be very careful here. Understanding autism does not mean excusing emotional neglect. It doesn't mean you erase your own trauma. It doesn't mean you say, oh, well, he can't get it, so I guess I just have to live without emotional connection. No, that's not healing. That's self-abandonment dressed up as compassion. The goal here is not to excuse everything. The goal is to accurately name what is happening so the right kind of help can finally begin. Because if your ASD husband is undiagnosed and the counselor treats him as merely defensive, selfish, narcissistic, immature, emotionally lazy, and so on, the intervention will fail. And when it fails, guess who usually feels crazy? You do. You think, oh, maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm just impossible to please, or I'm asking too much, or maybe this is just how marriage is supposed to go. But deep down, something inside of you knows, no, this is not normal emotional partnership here. That inner knowing matters. Cassandra syndrome often develops when a wife accurately senses the relational injury, but doesn't have a framework that anyone else recognizes. You're not crazy for feeling lonely. You're not wrong for needing emotional responsiveness. You're not weak for being exhausted, and you're not cruel for wanting your pain to be acknowledged. But at the same time, if autism is part of the picture, then the healing path has to be different. You can't solve neurodiverse marital pain with generic communication advice. You need translation. You need nervous system awareness. You need direct language, sensory understanding, realistic expectations. You need accountability without shaming somebody. You need compassion that includes both people, not compassion for him at your expense. So, what do we do with all of this? First, start separating impact from intent. The impact may be real neglect, real loneliness, real pain. But the intent is often not cruelty. That distinction helps you respond with clarity instead of collapse. Second, begin naming behaviors neurologically. Instead of saying, well, he's cold, try, he may not be externally signaling emotion right now. Instead of, he's stubborn, He relies on predictability for regulation. Instead of, he's ignoring me again, try, he has delayed processing and shutdown patterns. Instead of, he's rude, try, I think he's missing social emotional cues in real time. Now, this language doesn't minimize your pain, but it does give you a more accurate map. Third, stop expecting standard counseling to automatically understand this. Counselors are wonderful people, but unless they're trained in adult autism, neurodiverse marriage, masking, sensory processing, alexithymia, shutdowns, and Cassandra syndrome, they may unintentionally misread the entire relationship, not because they don't care, but because they may be using the wrong model. And when the wrong model is applied to the right pain, the wife often gets wounded again. So if you're watching this and thinking, this explains my marriage better than anything I've ever heard before, then please hear this. You're not imagining your pain, you're not making too much of it, you're not wrong for needing connection, and you're not obligated to carry this entire emotional burden alone. But there may be a deeper explanation for what you've been living with. Not an excuse, an explanation. An explanation is often the first doorway out of confusion. And once you understand these sub-microscopic signs, you stop fighting the wrong enemy. You stop trying to prove that you're hurt. You stop begging people to believe what they can't see. And you begin asking better questions. Is this autism? Trauma? Emotional neglect? Is this sensory overload? Shutdown? A skill deficit? Is this unwillingness? Is this something he can learn? Is this something I can live with? Those are not easy questions, but they're honest questions. And honest questions are far more healing than generic advice. Now, if this video resonates with you, I want you to know that there's language for what you've been experiencing. There is a framework. There is a reason standard counseling may not have worked. And there is a path forward that doesn't require you to erase yourself in order to understand him. You can have compassion for his neurology and still tell the truth about your loneliness. You can understand autism and still require respect. You can reframe his behavior and still honor the impact it has had on your heart. And that balance is where real healing begins. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I will read and respond to your comment. I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.